Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're going to take a BIOS tour of this motherboard here, which is fantastic value for money currently at the time of recording, which is the end of January 2025. This is of course the ASRock B850M-X Wi-Fi. Great little board, tons of features, excellent price point, and I think this is going to be one of the hot sellers of this generation. So for those of you that have bought this or are maybe thinking of buying one of these, let's take a look inside the BIOS and see what modifications and tweaks we can actually make and take a look at the layout. Okay, so let's take a look at the ASRock B850M-X Wi-Fi. This BIOS version is currently on 3.18.AS01. This is a beta BIOS currently at the time of recording, and we've got installed on here our processor, the Ryzen 5 8600G with integrated Radeon 760M graphics. Total memory installed currently 32 gigabytes, and we've currently got some Corsair RAM installed in here. This is the Vengeance and the non-RGB version running at 6,000 mega transfers per second using the EXPO profiles. So first page, obviously main page, gives us all that information. We've got our descriptions. You can also scan QR codes at any time on these pages to get more information. We've got the date at the bottom. We've got English, so you can change that if you want to. If you are in a alternate reality and you don't use English, you can do that there. And also you've got the search function. So if there's something you're looking for specifically, so if you click on F4 or the spyglass, type in something like EXPO, hit enter, and you can go directly to those individual settings. So if we go there, press enter, it'll take you straight there. So hopefully that is going to be useful if you're looking for anything which is not explained in the video or not showing. Just click on the search icon and you should find it. So let's go back to the main menu. You can navigate the menus by clicking here, or you can use the escape key and you can use the arrow keys, etc, etc. So let's go back to the main. You can click on the tabs as well, so OC Tweaker, or you can go to main, however you want to do it. So anyway, that is the main page. So let's start off, we'll go along these one by one. So next one is going to be OC Tweaker. So options we've got here, gaming mode. So if you're running a processor which has dual CCDs and you want to get the best out of them, or to disable simultaneous multi-threading, you can turn on game mode, which obviously for gaming may give you beneficial results. I'm going to leave that disabled because this processor only has a single CCD, so it doesn't necessarily need it. Again, you can play with this, do some benchmarks and see what works best for you. Next, we've got our performance boost options. So you can use the Cinebench profiles, which are pre-installed. That's pretty much useless. I would set that just to auto, unless you are doing specific Cinebench runs and you want to get the best possible scores. The next one is going to be the best bit for most of you watching this, is the performance preset. So out of the box, it will come set to auto. You can also set it to just turn on Precision Boost Overdrive, or PBO. But then you've got all these options down here, so you can go down through and choose which type of undervolt you want. So depending on your CPU cooling and your noise levels, etc., you can choose whichever you want. So for me personally, I've been using this one, PBO with TG max equal 85C, and the curve optimizer set to minus 30 millivolts. And that's been working out really well, getting some really good scores, temperatures are excellent. So that is what I'm using. Obviously your mileage will differ depending on what processor you're using. If you want to keep things really nice and cool and not cook your processor, you can maybe choose 65C. Again, entirely up to you. Some people probably just leave it set to auto and just carry on as it is, but for me, that is the best setting. CPU overclocking. So again, you can go into auto or customize, and you can set individual core voltages and frequencies for the CCDs. If you've got more than one, it'll show both of them there. So yeah, you can customize that should you wish to. Really not much point these days, but if you want to, you can. Next, we've got our DRAM frequency. So currently, because we've got EXPO enabled and it's been rebooted once or twice, it's coming up with DDR5, but you can manually choose a speed. So if you've maybe bought some faster RAM, maybe you bought some 6400 and it's not running particularly well, you can go in and manually choose a lower speed, or conversely, if you're trying to overclock, you can maybe boost these a little bit. For us on this system, this is the ideal solution. So this is running at the Infinity Fabric of 2000 mega transfers, or 2000 megahertz, however you want to look at it. So DDR 6000 is good for us, so I'm going to leave it as that. Memory context restore is actually enabled as a default now on this particular BIOS, which is excellent. So as it says on the description on the far side there, configure the memory context restore mode. When enabled, DRAM retraining is avoided when possible and the post latency is minimized. So to translate that into English, it basically means it'll boot faster and be more reliable. Next, we've got our DRAM profile configuration. So we can go into there and you can see the profile setting. Also, you've got performance modes. So you can choose either where it uses the AMD AGESA defaults, which I would recommend, or if you want to, you can try some slightly more aggressive or competitive settings to maybe tighten up the settings for your RAM. Again, down to the individual, I'm just showing you the options. You can choose to do whatever you want. I'm going to leave mine set to the defaults. Again, DRAM profile setting there, you can go in and choose your individuals. It will be set to auto as default. You can use the default settings for JDEC, which is DDR5 4800, which is the standard stock settings for all DDR5 RAM currently. You've also got your EXPO and XMP settings there. This is AMD, so we're going to use EXPO. So there you go, that is that section. So we can press escape to go back up. Next, we've got our DRAM timing configurations. So again, you can go through there if you want to try and tighten up your settings. You certainly can do. I'm no expert in this at all, so I leave that exactly as it is. You also got things like your gear down mode and also your DFE retraining. Next, we've got our VDIO voltages. So again, you've got all the voltages you can tweak with here. I'm not going to tell you what to put in here. I would leave them all as they are out of the factory, unless you know what you're doing and you want to manually change it. DRAM VDD voltage, DRAM VDO voltage. Yeah, you got all those things there. Also, you've got your Infinity Fabric frequency. So you can basically set those individually if you want to. Again, your best bet is to have it set so your U clock is the mem clock. Otherwise, you're running kind of out of sync. But potentially you might want to double it up to get better speeds for your RAM, or higher transfer speeds for your RAM, but possibly higher latency. Again, I would set it to U clock equals a mem clock. You can also set it to auto should you wish to. Also, you've got your SoC Uncore OC voltages. Yeah, loads of different voltage settings there. Overclock mode, bus speeds, etc. Again, you can overclock your bus speed on this. Generally, AMD systems will run at 100 megahertz as the bus speed. You can change that if you want to, like 102, 103, just to squeeze a little bit more out of the PCI Express bus. External voltage settings, you've got all those there as well. So your load line calibrations and all that kind of stuff. You can tweak whatever you want to in there. Also, you can save user defaults and also load defaults. So if you make some settings, you want to save them, you can save them to a USB drive if you've got one installed, and you can save a bunch of those should you wish to. So pretty basic stuff there. And also you can restore them from the USB flash drive, like I said previously. So that's pretty much it for OC Tweaker. And we'll go into advanced. So we've got CPU configuration. It tells you basically what CPU features are enabled. You've got your FTPM, you can turn that on or off. Your PSS mode, NX mode, SMT, so that's simultaneous multi-threading. So you can turn that on or off if you want to. You can also disable AVX 512 instruction sets. Pretty basic stuff there. So probably for most people, just turning on the AMD CPU FTPM is going to be probably what you're going to do. You can disable it or you can route it to the TPM header on the motherboard. So if you install a separate TPM, you can route it to there. I would leave it set to the AMD CPU FTPM for better compatibility with Windows 10 and Windows 11. Next, we've got our PCI configuration. So you've got your above 4G decoding. Always make sure that's enabled, otherwise your graphics card will not be able to see more than 4 gigabytes. Also, resizable bar support. That is, again, going to be an optional thing. Most people leave it on these days. The support is getting better. And also for some graphics cards like Intel, you will have to have that to get the better performance. Also, you've got your setting here for enabling the virtualization support of I/O devices. So if you're doing some sort of virtualization, virtual machines, that kind of stuff, you want to leave that enabled. If you're not doing virtual machine stuff, you might as well leave that as disabled. Onboard devices, this is going to be useful to a lot of people, I think. So the restore onboard LED defaults, that is for the onboard LEDs, RGB wise. You can just restore those RGB LED. If you want to, you can disable the RGB on the board. And also you've got your display priority. So if you're using onboard graphics or external graphics, so you can set the priority. You can use both at the same time. So if you have a dedicated GPU but you also wish to use the onboard GPU as well, you can set which one has the display priority for things like accessing BIOS and also for your primary login screen on your Windows computer. Also, onboard audio, you can enable or disable, same for the onboard LAN, and also for the WAN radio, so that's your wireless access. So this is for your Wi-Fi 6E on this particular device, and also you've got your Bluetooth antenna as well, which you can enable or disable. If you're using Bluetooth and you're using wireless, you can leave those enabled here. You can still disable them within Windows should you wish to temporarily do so. Storage configuration next. So we've got our SATA mode. You can choose RAID or Advanced Host Controller Interface, AHCI. You can set up whether the devices are hot plug, and it will tell you there which devices are present. If any are connected, we don't have any connected, so it says not present. Got the same for NVMe as well. So we've currently got one drive connected, which is our Kingston PCI Express Gen 4 drive. That is in slot number 2. As you can see, that is showing there. So that is it for storage. ACPI, so power management stuff. You've got suspend to RAM, restore on AC power loss. You can choose whichever you want to do, power on or power off. Deep sleep, so you can enable deep sleep for your computer. This is going to be useful for things like if you want your USB devices to be charged whilst your PC is not technically on but still switched on. You can have that as well. Obviously, that section there, USB power delivery in soft off state. You can choose to have enabled or disabled. Again, if you want to have your USB devices charging and working and illuminated whilst the PC is technically shut down but still connected to the mains, you can choose enabled or disabled. PCI Express power on. And also you've got your real-time clock, so you can get it. So PCIe devices power on, so that means like wake on LAN, that sort of thing. And the RTC is the real-time clock power on. So if you set that to enabled, you can choose a specific time where your PC will automatically turn itself on. I don't think anyone really uses that, but it's there should you wish to use it. Next, we've got our USB configuration. So it just tells you about your USB devices and the fact that the AHCI handoff is enabled. That should be. And also your mass storage driver support should also be enabled, so leave those as they are. Next is our trusted computing. So it tells you which version of the TPM you're using, whether it's disabled or enabled, and also active banks, all that kind of stuff. If you want to make any changes there, you can do, such as enable or disable your TPM. Next is the AMD CBS. So in here you've got things like CPU common options, thread enablement, performance modes, P-states, etc. Northbridge common options, all that kind of stuff. So let's go through those. So nothing really in here. Global C-state control, performance boost, you can make changes there. I would leave all of this as it is. Choice is up to you, but yeah, there's lots of options there to go through. DF common options, again, similar sort of stuff. If you need to change anything in there, that's where to do it. UMC, got DDR options, configuration for RAM, etc., all that kind of stuff, and DDR security. NBIO, that stands for Northbridge Input Output. So this can be quite useful. So if you want to use the virtual machine stuff, virtual I/O, you can enable or disable there. You've also got your ARRI support for PCI Express. And most importantly, for some people, I think is going to be the graphics configuration if you're using onboard integrated graphics or the built-in graphics processor on some Ryzen processors. You go into there, so you've got your DGPO mainly, you set to auto. The configuration, so you've got options here for auto, which will allocate RAM dynamically. You've also got iGPU disabled, so that will disable the onboard graphics. You've also got UMA specified, so you can actually specify a certain frame buffer size in gigabytes or megabytes, however you want to do it. So for most people, like 4 gigs or 8 gigs is going to be pretty much what you want for your onboard graphics. It won't really utilize much more than that. So 8 gigs is probably going to give you less problems in games. 4 gigs, there may be some games which get texturing issues. So yeah, 8 gigs is probably going to be okay. Alternatively, just set it to auto, or like I said on here, you can set it to auto there, or game optimized. Doesn't make a great deal of difference either way, but these are where you can make your changes to the amount of RAM which is allocated to your onboard graphics, or disable it altogether. So that's pretty much it for that section. I'm going to leave it as game optimized for now. Loopback modes and error reporting, all that kind of stuff there. You've also got FCSH, so USB controllers. You can enable or disable your USB ports, and the same for USB 4. This board doesn't have any options for it, so it's kind of irrelevant. And you've got your spread spectrums, which you can enable there as well. Okay, so moving on, SMU, so system configurations, thermal controls, all that kind of stuff, eco mode. Some people like to use eco mode. Again, it's up to you entirely. SoC, so trusted platform module, you can have that enabled, and yeah, all that kind of usual stuff. A lot of security stuff there. And you've got there things for chipset management and chipset power management. If you want to do any of that, I don't think many people will. PBS, so your AMD firmware version, which is the AGESA, bootloaders, etc. You've also got your graphics features, so HDMI support, whether you want to have HDMI 2.0 support, and the common platform, again, link speeds. Some of this might be useful, so you can change your PCI Express lane configuration. You can see here, I've only got ×8 listed because this is a 8600G processor. If you had a normal or traditional Ryzen processor with the full PCI Express bus, then you'd see ×16 listed there. So if for some reason you want to adjust the lanes for bifurcation, etc., you can do that should you wish to. Again, you link speeds. So if you have an older graphics card or you're using a graphics card riser in an older riser, then you can set it to Gen 3 if you're getting problems with your graphics displaying. Yeah, you can basically do whatever you want to there. Same for the links and M.2s, you can do the same sort of thing, and also you can enable the NVMe RAID mode. So you can choose that to be enabled or disabled. Next we're going to AMD overclocking. You have to accept this, that potentially you could damage your system. And you've got your manual CPU overclocking, so you can put frequencies, voltages, and core counts. So you can disable core counts, all that stuff. Same for the GPU, you can put in a clock frequency there and also a manual voltage if you wanted to. Again, these systems generally overclock themselves pretty well, so I would leave that unless you know exactly what you're doing or you're just tinkering. DDR and Infinity Fabric, again, the same sort of stuff, so it's kind of like another way of getting to the same bit we were before. You also got Nitro mode as well, so that can improve support for faster modules if you're running over 6,000 mega transfers. Potentially that might be useful. Yeah, the Infinity dividers, so you can set your Infinity Fabrics manually. You're not guaranteed to get any of those frequencies, but you can have a bit of a play with it. And your U-clock mode, so you can set it to auto, so the system will decide what's best. You can also set it so the U-clock equals the mem clock, or you can set it so it's basically in gear mode or gear down mode, or gear up mode, I suppose it would be. So that will give you a divisor of 2. I'm going to set it to U-clock equals mem clock. So that is pretty much it there. Precision Boost Overdrive, you can have set to auto, disabled, or enabled. So not really a great deal of choice you can do there. Again, most of that is done from the menu setting we saw at the very beginning, an OC tweaker. So I'm just going to leave that as it is currently. You've got your voltage controls there. So if you want to, you can set voltage control. LN2 mode, so if you're doing liquid nitrogen overclocking on your poor little motherboard here, you can enable LN2 mode if you wanted to. A bit pointless on this board, I think. L-clock frequency controls, you've got those there, set to auto or manual, so you can set your frequencies yourself. Again, I would leave it to auto unless you know exactly what you're doing. So that's it for the AMD overclocking. You've also got things like the BIOS setup text color, so you can choose the default. So if you have a specific thing, so you want to change the color that you can see on the screen in the BIOS, you can choose it to suit your particular needs or for your system. I don't know why you want to. I guess for some people, if you're colorblind, then you could do that. Mouse relative movement delta. So this is for making your mouse faster in the BIOS. So this is basically like overclocking your mouse. So your pointer may go wild. It's actually pretty accurate or pretty fluid anyway in the BIOS, but if you want to, if you're having problems with your mouse, you can turn that up. Choose either 2 times the speed or 4 times the speed. Active page on entry, so depending what page you want on the BIOS. So if you're just doing overclocking and you're trying to do something specific, you could maybe set it to OC tweaker, so every time you boot into the BIOS, it's going to just save you a click and go straight into OC tweaker. Maybe you want to go into tools, hardware monitor, whatever, security. You get the general idea. For most people, I would probably leave it on main. Also, you've got the option for full HD UEFI BIOS. And this actually, if you want to change it, you can set it so that if you're using an older monitor or maybe you're using a TV screen from a few years back, it doesn't support UEFI BIOS, you can disable that so you can gain your access to your BIOS easier on older TV sets. And also run it at a lower resolution. As it says there in the description on the right hand side, it will set it to 1024 by 768. Remember those days? So I'll set that to auto, so it'll detect if it needs to or not. And that is pretty much it, I think, in this section. So next we've got the ASRock USB LED test form. This is something about testing the onboard RGB, but I've got nothing connected, so I can't really show you or do anything. But you can choose the default modes. This is basically how to control your lighting. So depending on what you want. So if you don't want to install the software, you can just set it in the BIOS to be a specific mode. So if you want the LED lighting to be off, choose off, static, breathe in, strobe, cycling, random, wave, all that kind of usual stuff. Rainbow is the kind of the usual one. You can also choose a speed and also a brightness level as well. You can apply that to all the channels. So there's 3 different RGB channels on this board. Well, 4 technically. One's 12 volt RGB, the other 3 are 3 volt addressable RGB. And yeah, you can save that data to the system should you wish to. You also got your LED firmware recovery. So if for some reason you do an update and it knackers up your RGB lighting, you can potentially do the firmware recovery from there. Choice is entirely up to you. You'll need to download that from the ASRock website. Also, you've got options for SSD secure erase, media sanitization for other drives, and also you can enter instant flash. This will be to flash your BIOS. We haven't done a video on this yet. As soon as the next BIOS comes out, I'll try and update the video. You don't have to use the USB BIOS flashback. This is the other method of doing it. So this is updating the BIOS from actually within the BIOS itself. Next up, one of the best tools actually in here, in my opinion, is the Auto Driver Installer. Now, to be fair, AMD drivers are pretty easy to install anyway, but actually having this, so when you first install Windows after the first reboot, you'll get a pop-up on your screen saying, do you want to install the latest drivers for your platform? It'll go ahead, scan the motherboard, get the latest drivers and install them for you, which is very handy. Saves you having to manually do it or just rely on Windows updates, etc. So pretty decent, although some people have noted that there is kind of like a downside to this, that someone could maliciously inject a driver into that system. So whether you want enabled or disabled is entirely up to you. I've got it disabled now because I've already done the drivers, but if you want to periodically check for new drivers, you can just set it to enabled, reboot the system, and it will do it on the next reboot. So that is the tool section. Next we've got hardware monitor. So this is pretty much self-explanatory. So this is likely where possibly will tell you where to go if you're having problems with temperatures or maybe your power supply is failing. So for instance, on this section here, if I grab my mouse, you can see that our 3.3 volt rail is currently at 3.34, which is pretty much perfect. Our 5 volt rail is 5.016. So again, pretty much bang on. Although our 12 volt rail on this particular setup at the moment is registering 11.985. Now obviously that isn't a great deal down, as you can see it's just jumped there a little bit, which potentially could be a sign of a loose connection or poor voltage regulation or even a loose power cable. And in this particular instance, I'm pretty sure it's the power cable which is a little bit loose. So I need to address that later, but again, this is good for fault finding. You can also set up things like all of your fan controls, set them to be standard modes, PWM, etc. So you can choose the modes there, DC mode or PWM mode. I'm not going to go too in depth on this because it's pretty boring stuff, but you can control all the individual fan and pump headers in here, which is pretty useful. You can also go into Fantastic. So if we do that quickly, this is basically a graphical interface of basically what I've just explained. So you've got all of your fans, you can set all of them the same speed. If you go into CPU fan 1, for example, you can choose silent, standard, performance, full speed, or customize. So if you want to set up your own curve for your particular fans, you can do. Just drag these around until you get it into a place which works for you. So if you want your fans to be fast or slow, you can go ahead here and make the individual changes. Quite a nice little interface. And when you're done, just click on apply and it'll keep those changes. Again, you can do the same thing. So if you've got something connected to AIO pump, you can have it full speed, or if your pump's a little bit noisy, you can choose customize and just drag these down a little bit. You can also choose whether it monitors the CPU or motherboard. For this, obviously for the AIO, You don't really want it to monitor the motherboard, that's a bit pointless. You want to have it monitoring your CPU, but say for instance you go into one of the chassis fan headers. I won't save that. So on the chassis fan, you may want to monitor the motherboard temperatures. You may want to monitor the CPU. I don't know, your system is going to be different, and it will prompt you as well to apply the changes or save the changes if you move around without actually saving anything. So we'll apply that. So yeah, anyway, you get the general idea. It's pretty straightforward stuff, and you've got all the individual ones listed there. When you're done, just click on exit, and that is pretty much it. Also for fan tuning, so if you're not too sure what your fans are capable of or if they're set up correctly, click on fan tuning. What it'll do is it'll go to every single header on the board and run all the fans from 0 volts up to 12 volts and monitor the RPMs. So just a little bit more accurate means of setting up your fans and getting the right RPM rates and all that kind of stuff. Next we go on to security, so you can set up a supervisor password, user passwords if you want to, and also you can enable or disable Secure Boot here should you wish to, or install Secure Boot keys if you need to for any reason. And that's pretty much it for security. Next one is going to be boot, so you've got your boot option priorities. So I've only got one drive connected here, so it's going to obviously go to the Windows Boot Manager on the Kingston drive. You can enable or disable CSM, so if you've got older drives which are not using GPT or UEFI type setup, they're using MBR, you can turn on CSM to make it so your system will see older drives. You also got your ROM settings there for your onboard LAN, to boot from the LAN. You also got your setup prompt timeout, boot up numlock, full screen logo, and also fast boot. Fast boot is kind of here or there, whether or not you want to actually enable or disable. If you disable it, it will be a little bit slower to boot, but it will initialize all of your devices one by one. Whereas if you choose fast boot, I think it only does like a minimal set. Actually, yeah, it says that on the right hand side there. Again, read the descriptions if you're not entirely sure, just to make sure that I'm saying all the right stuff. And I think that is pretty much it. We go to exit, so obviously you've got your usual stuff there. So you've got your save changes and exit, discard changes and exit. So if you think you've made a mistake and you don't want to accept the changes, just you can log out. You can discard all your changes and carry on. You can load the BIOS defaults. So if for some reason you put some overclocking settings and it's just all going horribly wrong in Windows, just set the defaults. That's a nice thing to do. You can also launch a shell from a file system device. You also got your boot override as well. So if you had a USB drive in here with Windows on, you could choose that, and then the next time the system boots, it will override the primary drives and boot to whatever drive you choose. Like I said, obviously all of these things, if you want to, you can at any time scan the QR code down here. I don't like scanning QR codes, so I generally don't do that, but I'll put a link to the BIOSes in the video description, so if there's any BIOS updates, you can check it there. Also, I'll try and leave some links to the product itself, so if you want to possibly purchase this board, now you've seen the BIOS and you think, actually, that's pretty cool, I could live with one of those in my PC, I'll put some links in there. They will be affiliated, so we do generate a small revenue. If you click on a purchase, it doesn't cost you anything more, but it does go some ways towards helping out the channel. Okay, so there you go. There is about 30 minutes of your life that you're never going to get back, but hopefully you have been somewhat educated into the options available to the ASRock B850M X Wi-Fi. I think this is a cracking board. It's got a really nice little BIOS, pretty much everything you ever need in there, and it comes in at such a spectacular price, like £115 for this board at the time of recording. Although I think today is the day the tariffs start, so yeah, who knows what's going to happen. It might get cheaper. I doubt it. It might get more expensive, but still, I think it's still a cracking board in comparison with what else you can get on the market for a similar sort of price. I'm waffling now. Hopefully the BIOS tutorials helped you and helps you to find the bits you're looking for. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments section, or alternatively head over to our Discord and yeah, just pop into one of the tech support rooms and I'll try and help you out as best I can. But I think that's going to wrap this video up. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.